Hey, what's up, guys? Um, I'm just waiting for my car to get done charging. I like to kind of air it out like that so that it's less musty and dusty. Once a day, ideally, I like to try to air out my car, and then I mooch off of a free EV charging station. You can just find them. They're all over the place. But this is something you can do when you're homeless and you live in your car and your car is an EV, right? So take notes, because you're not going to do this if you're not homeless, right? Like, even though there are free EV charging stations, like, you're not going to try to save $10 by, charging your car at this hotel. What are you going to do? Take an Uber back home? Like, are you really going to just sit here for 3 or 4 hours? I'm willing to do that because I'm homeless. Like, this is my home, so this makes sense for me, right? So anyways, the video, right? It's about I'm worth $4 million, so why do I live in my car? Good question. I'm living on a fixed budget. I retired early, and not to say I'm gonna stay retired early forever. I probably won't. I'm basically in a short early retirement phase, and I think I'm going to just slow travel the world for about 2-3 years, and then either during that slow travel or after, I'll probably start a startup or join an early stage startup, because I do like the risk profile of startups. It makes sense for me. I don't need the money, but if I'm going to work, I would want the potential to be explosive. So I like the risk profile of 95% failure rate, 5% chance of becoming worth 8 figures. That's a risk profile that makes sense for me, because I don't need the money. And when you're worth $4 million, it doesn't make sense to just work and grind a corporate job so that you're worth $5 million a few years later and $6 million a few years after that. That simply doesn't make sense. And I go into this in previous video, my first video on the channel, but your happiness level plateaus, not just with your income, but with your net worth. It follows a similar concept, right? So if you're worth $4 million, being worth $5 million doesn't change your quality of life at all. You're still gonna go on the same vacations, you're still gonna, eat at the fancy Michelin star restaurant every now and then. And it's just a matter of what percentage of your net worth you're spending. Is it 1%? Is it 1.3%? It doesn't matter. So why would you work a miserable job with a dickhead boss? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to work a normal job. Once you're worth around $4 million, you want to pick a side. You either want to just retire early, or you want to join a startup of some sort. But you want to aim for moonshots. You don't want to just grind. If you understand the ratio of money to happiness, just continuing to grind is the worst decision you can make in that spot. Yeah, so I'm basically working with a fixed budget of $50,000 to $80,000 a year. When I withdraw 1 to 1.2% of my net worth annually, and that should not only guarantee that I never run out of money, but because it's way safer than 4% withdrawal rate that the FIRE people tend to do. But it should also, in fact, grow my net worth over time, because the stock market averages 8 to 10% annually, and even if you back out 3% for inflation, that leaves at least 5%. And I'm only withdrawing 1 to 1.3%, 1.5%. So basically, my net worth should continue to grow over time. But the reason I'm keeping my base level withdrawal kind of low is because I want to stay below the $47,050 and pay 0% taxes on my investments. And that's more just kind of like me being anal and not wanting to pay a government any money if I don't need to. Other people will just go over that a little bit and spend pay a few thousand in taxes every year, and to each their own, But again, circling back, so I'm working with a budget of $50,000 to $80,000. So how do I have the most enriching life experiences on that fixed budget? I go into this in my first video again, but you don't do it by just living within the budget of a person who makes that much. That's literally the worst way to do it. That's a very boring life, and there's no point in living a boring life. You do it by following a concept that I call Bursty spending, which is the intermittent fasting of spending money. So you basically, you live on a very low budget so that your base level of satisfaction recalibrates to that budget. And then you, in short bursts, you suddenly spend a lot. And you do this with everything, right? So I live in my car so that my base level expectation for housing is rock bottom. And then one weekend a month, I rent out a baller ass Airbnb so that I can really ride that wave of happiness and unlock new experiences when my brain goes from, being in poverty to being in opulent, lavish wealth. And, it's kind of like Count of Monte Cristo type shit. But I do that with lodging, with the housing. That's why I live in my car. And I do that with food. So I'll drink like Soylent every day. And then like 1 day a month or 2 days a month, I'll eat at like a $400 Michelin star meal. And it's sort of like it's like an experience that a normal rich person can't unlock, because they eat well already. So the delta of happiness from eating well to eating Michelin star well is smaller than the delta of happiness of drinking Soylent for 3 weeks and then eating the best meal that the most celebrated celebrity chef has created. That's a delta that the most privileged people in the world, that's an experience that they can't say they had, but you can have. And that's kind of the concept of bursty spending. And that's a philosophy that I live by. And I derived all this mathematically if you want to watch the first video. So yeah, this idea, right? I apply it to housing, to food. People already apply it to relationships. But I suppose whether you think this makes sense to you, you have to ask yourself, if you could, if the devil were to offer you a deal where you could live like a king for the first like 20 years of your life, and then after that you live like an absolute, like you're in prison like a slave for the next 20 years, would you take it? And I would say yes to that every time. And yes is actually the correct answer mathematically. It's because you will always have those memories. You've unlocked memories that other people can never have. And these are the sort of things that, say, like Bernie Madoff or like that Catch Me If You Can guy, scammers, like people who start some kind of Ponzi scheme and then they know the Ponzi scheme's going to implode on them at some point in the future, but they still do it. I think these are things that they considered, and they just made the calculated decision that this is worth it to them. And I say they're smart for doing it. Just want to be clear, I am not saying to be unethical. I would never start a Ponzi scheme. That's like really scumbag behavior. I'm saying hypothetically, if you could be in a situation where, for one reason or another, you could live like a king for 20 years and then you have to live like a slave for 20 years, is it worth it? The answer is it is worth it. So I sort of live my life that way. And the devil never made any deal with me, but those deals are self-imposed, right? I have my budget of $50,000 to $80,000 a year, and I'm drinking Soylent every day and living in my car because I'm conditioning my mind. I'm detoxing myself to recalibrate to the base level happiness that comes with the absolute bare minimum, such that when I ride the wave up to the absolute like euphoric peak of whatever sense it may be, whether it's dining, right? That's like taste. That way I can hit the very high watermarks of happiness and unlock those experiences. So that's my thinking behind that. And the question is like, okay, what if I'm worth 8 figures? What if my startup blows up and I'm wildly wealthy? What would I do? I would still do this, but from the lowest lows, my highs would be like insanely high. Instead of just eating a Michelin star restaurant, like it would go crazy, bro. Like I would I would probably like, I would, I would probably like supermodel Wagyu steak on a plate on her back while listening to like Mozart on surround sound. Like every sense, right? Like eyes, nose, mouth, ears. Every sense would have to pop. It would have to be maximum. And that would be the goal, basically. Like, just imagine that and just like, even if I died in that moment, like, I'd probably be okay with it. Like, what an experience, dude, to unlock that. Just, like, that would be insane. And yeah, I'm basically just, I would just do that, and then I would detox from it, live in my car for 2 months, renormalize my base level happiness, get used to that. Let the hedonic treadmill recalibrate me back to that. Drink my Soylent, and then 1 or 2 days again, rent out the most ridiculous Airbnb, and and have an orgy again. That's the way I live my life, and I believe that's the way to live your life if you want to maximize your happiness. So yeah, that's why I live in my car, even though I'm worth $4 million. Take care.